I've said before that there's no category of devil fruits more hype than mythical zone fruits, but I may have been mistaken since arguably awakened fruits are even more hype. Let me know what you think by the end of the video in the comments, and today we'll be discussing all 14 awakened devil fruits in One Piece, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Chill the parking within and smash that like button if you enjoy these longer One Piece videos and want to keep them coming. Make this the video you join the Nakama if you haven't already by subscribing and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss future One Piece videos and updates. And you're also helping us achieve our crazy dream of hitting 2 million subscribers on YouTube, so I'd be eternally grateful for that. And now, without further ado, let's jump into this, the hypest of One Piece topics, spoilers and all. So perhaps the least interesting of the awakenings are the jailer beasts at Impel Down, since they sort of just shoved them together and they sort of just oversimplified / underhyped what we could expect from Zone Awakenings. Thankfully, not all Zone Awakenings are like theirs, or else some of the later Awakenings we'll discuss would have been more boring and less hype, as we'll get into. In the case of the Jailer Beast, the Zone Awakenings came with the innate nature of the Zone will consuming the user's personality. So yeah, they gained extreme physical power, but also became simple-minded man-beasts, not very hype. Crocodile mentioned that as awakened zone types, their greatest strength is their toughness and recovery speed. The Minotaurus, we're told, is pretty much an awakened cow fruit user, even if a Minotaur in mythology is a half bull, half man. Now keep in mind, we didn't get the exact names of these fruits from Oda yet. Luffy can't help but remarking that the Minotaurus sure is fast. It's explained that Minotaurus is a cold-blooded demon guard, a monster that tosses people like trash, and the height difference compared to Luffy is huge. This thing is buff and gigantic. It carries around a spike club too as a weapon. Gear 2nd Luffy can send the beast flying, and they're not the main bad guys to fear during this prison break arc. But as mindless, strong, and fast monsters, they do have a scary presence, at least initially. Still, despite being awakened zones, whereas Luffy is nowhere near awakening at this point, they just aren't that strong relatively speaking. Mino Koala, the awakened koala beast, Mino Rhinoceros, the awakened rhinoceros beast, and Mino Zebra, the awakened zebra beast, all get easily wrecked by the combined forces of Luffy, Jinbei, and Crocodile. A star-studded group to lose to for sure, but again not really serving to hype up the potential of awakenings. Notably, Mino Rhinoceros carries 2 spike clubs, Mino Koala spiked knuckles, and Mino Zebra a spiked ball at the end of a long shaft. Not that these weapons do them much good. So when looking at these awakenings seem kind of underwhelming, especially zones, since you can't really picture there being a main antagonist who is just mindless, and yes, the payoff of super strength and speed is cool, but definitely not cool enough if they can be easily dealt with by non-awakened characters. But never fear, awakenings, including Zone Awakenings, get much more hype as the series goes on. We thankfully find out that Zone Awakenings don't have to come with the loss of personality or complex thinking, and we learned that first when Luffy awakens his mythical sun god Nika fruit. But let's first discuss Kaku and Rob Lucci's awakenings and save Luffy, the best awakened zone, for last. Now this is probably clear by now, but obviously it seems like the stronger a character is before awakening, the stronger their power boost will be when awakening comes. Not all awakened users are equal in strength, as is obvious when you see a Gear 2 Luffy take down an awakened zone without much trouble. These next awakenings happen to already considerably strong characters, which inevitably make them more hype. So let's start with Kaku, who ate the Ox fruit, modeled giraffe, and became a giraffe human. Now his giraffe awakening didn't make me think he could handle Zoro, obviously, in chapter 1072, but it was still cool to see. We see that he, like Lucci, has a sort of dark cloud floating around his neck, like the white one that floats around Luffy's. At first, Kaku's nose pistol pushes Zoro back, who blocks it with his swords. The attack is drill-like as his long neck swirls behind the head, but props to his armament hockey, you know it's on point when you can attack swords with your nose. He can then move into Kiriman Gyro, meaning giraffe man-snake rotation, where he rapidly rotates, creating cutting wind slashes similar to Kaido. Zoro acts more annoyed than challenged though, saying he just fought plenty of wriggly things at Wano and at this point he's getting tired. He pushes Kaku back, sending his head smashing into his surroundings. Now Zoro doesn't just beat Kaku here with an unnamed attack, but the fight does end with Stussy taking him out with a vampire-like sneak attack. Awakened Kaku passes out before Zoro can use significant named attacks on him, or really try for that matter, but chances are he wouldn't have put up much of a fight against Zoro at this point anyways. And that's further supported by the fact fact that in the manga as of writing, Zoro was paired with Rob Lucci in battle while Luffy is paired with Kizaru, which seems like a much better matchup for the new Zoro. Next, we see Luffy freeing a captured Lucci and Kaku to help them against the Seraphims. Probably not the smartest move, but it lets us see more of these two in action, and Kaku uses Tempest Kick White Thunder in unison with Zoro's Purgatory Onigiri to send Little Mihawk flying back. His attack Tempest Kick Slaughter is paired up with Zoro's One Sword style Iai Death Lion song, but it's still not enough to keep S-Hawk down. But luckily, Zoro finally realizes that these dudes have similarities to Lunarians, and he warns them to watch it since their attacks won't do any damage unless the flames are out. We later see that these guys did beat the Seraphim and then took York, the traitor punk hostage. What's shocking is afterwards, they gave Lucci enough freedom to take out Stussy once he saw that Kizaru was here, but Sanji quickly dealt with an injured Kaku by trapping him in a sea stone bubble. Clearly, Kaku is not treated by Oda as a formidable opponent, awakened giraffe or not. However, Oda does see fit to let Zoro and Lucci clash. So that brings us to Lucci, who recently awakened the Neko Neko no Mi model Leopard, aka the Cat Cat Fruit model Leopard. Understandably, Lucci's awakening gets more screen time than Kaku's since he's stronger and the main antagonist of their group. He also has the dark fiery clouds around his awakened form and at the end of his tail, which almost makes me want to assume that these fiery cloud looking things accompany zone awakenings where the user maintains their will and personality. Perhaps your will has to be especially strong to experience this kind of zone awakening versus the lose your personality kind. Luffy and Lucci proceed to go at it, Lucci more serious and Gear 5 Luffy mostly looking like he's just having fun. As with Kaku, these non-mythical zone awakenings obviously increase your speed, power, and durability, but you don't see crazy new abilities like we're going to see with Luffy. In this form, Lucci is strong enough to do a hockey fist clash with Luffy. I'll give credit where it's due, and Lucci's sharp, hockey-laden awakened claws are able to get to Sentomaru and take him down. What's more, he's fast enough to do this without Luffy or Sentomaru stopping him. However, Sentomaru does say he saw him coming and blocked the attack. It just looks like Lucci still got through the impressive defensive power of Sentomaru, which is considerable praise in and of itself. Luffy ends the battle by hitting Lucci with a Dawn Rocket. Lucci coughs blood and he asks himself, where is the new Yonko getting so much force? Then Luffy makes it to the leaving vacuum rocket without Lucci being able to stop him, so clearly Luffy came out on top in that exchange. And most recently, you got Zoro taking on Lucci saying with this level of power, there's no way Zoro will let him fight the captain. And Lucci says, maybe you're right, I think it will be worthwhile to kill the number 2 of an emperor. And that's not only useful for showing that, yeah, awakened Lucci is obviously not Luffy level, but it's also cool how he's seen enough now to acknowledge the Straw Hats as a Yonko crew because he was reluctant to do that before. But clearly they earned his respect now. All in all, these non-mythical awakenings are pretty straightforward where they gain in power, defense, endurance, and speed, and the ones that kept their personalities intact after awakening also have the distinctive fiery clouds floating around them in their awakened forms. But of course, Luffy's mythical zone awakening is much less straightforward, and because of that, a lot more fun to talk about. So as those of us caught up with the manga or anime know by now, Luffy recently awakened his Gomu Gomu no Mi, and it turns out the name was a cover. He actually has the mythical zone Sun God Nika fruit. In other words, the Gomu Gomu no Mi is actually not a Paramecia rubber fruit, but a mythical zone fruit. Its actual name's the human fruit mythical model Nika. And Nika was a sun god associated with liberation. His hair looks like it's made out of flames and turns white in this form, and the rest of his outfit turns mostly white too. Of course, there is also the fiery cloud we saw with Lucci and Kaku, but in this case it's white, not dark. Luffy calls this awakened form Gear 5, and I gotta say it is reminiscent of the Super Saiyan form with light colored hair standing up like that, but that only makes it a cool homage to Dragon Ball and doesn't take away from the hype at all. As far as we know, this is the only fruit that was so dangerous and special that the government changed its name. It's associated with the sun god Nika, with Joy Boy, and now with our main character. And the last time it awakened was more than 800 years ago, so since then, the users before Luffy only got to the rubber stage of it. That's a nice little aspect to it because yeah, Luffy still has a super special fruit, but at least he had to work hard in order to unlock its specialness. Many others could have had this godly fruit and never gotten to this point. The 5 elders further explained that they attempted to get the sun god fruit for 800 years and not once did they succeed. It actively tried to escape their grasp, and that type of personification makes sense because specifically zone fruits are said to contain retain a will of their own. This suggests that the fruit probably picked Luffy similarly to how I believe Yamato's fruit probably picked her. It wasn't just Luffy happening to eat it, it probably called out to him on some level, and I think the Netflix adaptation actually made that even more clear. So, what are some of the properties of this god fruit? We know the rubber fruit, but it's explained that after awakening, the rubbery body of the user gains greater physical strength and freedom. It is said by the 5 elders that there is no power more ridiculous, and in the official translation, we are given not 1, but 2 exclamation marks. It's portrayed as the biggest deal and for good reason. It's also mentioned that the rubbery body lets the user fight in whatever way he fancies, bringing smiles to the faces of the people. Another name for the sun god Nika, we're told, is also the warrior of liberation. Now that's a big deal, the quote saying that the user of the fruit can fight in whatever way they fancy. It seems to imply that Luffy is only limited by his imagination when it comes to the way in which he fights and the powers which he manifests. I won't go so far as to say that he can do anything yet, because some of this might be more legend than truth, but it'll be interesting to see how accurate the description is as the story progresses and Luffy continues to use his new awakened powers. So far we've seen crazy stuff like Luffy using his awakened fruit to grab Kaido's giant dragon form like he was a mere snake toy and pull him up to the roof. He proceeded to practically enter a Toon World. He spun Kaido around and slammed him into the ground over and over again. Kaido's eyes pop out like in the Looney Tunes cartoons, suggesting that Luffy can make his opponents take on these exaggerated characteristics, not just himself. We also see Luffy pull a Popeye and summon massive muscles all of a sudden. I mean, if he is strong enough to lift Kaido like this, I doubt there's any opponent he can't lift. He also rubberized the ground and lifted it up to deflect a blast breath, showing his awakened powers can definitely affect his surroundings, not just other characters or himself. He then caught lightning and threw it like Zeus himself, and flew by running through the air like in the old cartoons. Perhaps the most absurd thing is when he entered Kaido's body and pushed his hands out of Kaido's eyes so that he had a pair of dragon eyeball gloves, as the eyeball stretched with Luffy's arms. He also punched through Kaido's head, but ironically, Luffy's awakened powers seem to protect Kaido in a sense at times, because one would assume his eyeballs wouldn't survive and his head wouldn't survive if he didn't become stretchy and cartoonish because of Luffy's awakened influence on him. He used this awakening and of course his mastery over Haki to beat the so-called strongest creature in the world and the living Yonko with the highest bounty at the time. We talked about the Lucci fight too, and in this fight he made his head big enough to almost eat the awakened Lucci. He also finished the fight by making a surrounding tube stretchy and flinging himself from it and into Lucci. His Dawn Rocket stretches Lucci to an insane degree, showing again that Luffy's powers influenced Lucci just like they did Kaido. Most recently, we saw awakened Luffy versus Kizaru. He uses his power to magnify his size and uses his gigantic hand to pick up the Admiral at the end of chapter 1092. In the next chapter, Luffy takes in a light beam designed to stop the Vega tank. Pretty impressive. Luffy just says the attack is hot, but still he appears to have tanked that Admiral attack in cartoonish fashion like a champ. And that's just some of the cartoonish stuff we've seen from Luffy. Clearly, his awakening has much more fun possibilities than the other awakened zones we've seen. It's very versatile, and I'd put my money on him rather than on Kizaru at this point if it doesn't end in an escape instead. If you notice, Luffy's awakening allowed him to change himself like a zone, but also his surroundings like the other Paramecia awakenings we're about to get into, making it very special indeed, and it makes sense why Shanks' crew took that one specifically from the world government. Not to mention, Luffy's fruit can even have an effect on his opponents and not just on inanimate objects. Definitely ridiculous and a unique power. Next, let's look at the Paramecia awakenings I mentioned. First, let's look at Don Quixote Doflamingo. He awakened the Ito Ito no Mi, aka the String fruit, in order to become a string human. Very Spider-Man-like in his qualities. As with other Paramecia, the awakening allows the user to affect the surrounding area like the ground or buildings. In this case, Doflamingo can turn them into strings, which he can then use to enhance his attack or defense. In one case, he turns the surrounding ground to strings and then brings them up to block Gear 4 Luffy's attack. He then proceeds to turn surrounding buildings into strings and Luffy is shocked, saying it's almost like he isn't a Paramecia. And let's give Oda comedic points for that now looking back, because Luffy actually was the one who wasn't a Paramecia. Doflamingo uses the strings of the buildings and elsewhere to send spikes of strings at Luffy at one point, but Luffy is able to break through and land a hit. The tide turns when Luffy runs out of Gear 4 steam. But when the fight starts again, it's crazy to see Doflamingo use Ever White to turn the entire town into strings, and the strings now below Luffy wrap around him. Definitely a scary power, but in the end, Luffy's Gear 4 punches through Doflamingo's strings, and with Gum Gum Gong, he delivers a finishing blow. Although it's cool to see Doflamingo create a spiderweb of string to protect himself, it's clearly not as effective if the opponent is strong enough to punch through it. So although this was already pretty obvious with the Jailer Beasts, again we see that although Awakening can be cool, very cool in fact, it doesn't mean that a non-awakened Devil Fruit user isn't stronger. A Gear 4 Luffy beat awakened Doflamingo, and in Luffy's case, awakened Gear 5 is way stronger. And that makes sense too, because as Kaido said to Luffy, Haki is the key to ruling the seas, and that's how Roger was able to do it without any Devil Fruit at all. In the end, it was Luffy's Haki mastery that allowed him to finish off Kaido's flaming dragon form without being burnt. The awakening alone wouldn't have been enough. So as we're enjoying how fun these Devil Fruit powers are, we just have to keep in mind that it'll never be the fruit that makes the man, awakened or not. Next up is Charlotte Katakuri, who awakened the Mochi Mochi no Mi, a special paramecia named after the Japanese confections. Even that special adjective in front of the paramecia title makes it a very unique and intriguing fruit, as we'll get into. The user can usually create, control, and turn their body parts into mochi. This material can be like a liquid and easily malleable, but it can also be hardened. It's sticky and can trap people, but as Jinbei explains, you can escape it if there's enough moisture. The whole being able to turn your body into mochi is similar to a logia, and that's special about this fruit because you'll remember, even after awakening, Doflamingo can't turn himself into strings, and thus dodge physical attacks like a logia. So with all these powers already, what is Katakuri's awakening? Well, it's like Doflamingo's in a sense that it allows him to turn surrounding inorganic material into mochi. In one case, he turns the ground below Luffy's feet into mochi as well. His awakened Devil Fruit helped Katakuri reach a 1.057 billion berry bounty. And even though now we know that Luffy's fruit is the Nika fruit, and in fact superior to Katakuri's, at the time Katakuri's fruit was portrayed as a superior version of Luffy's Gum Gum fruit. He could extend his limbs like rubber, but also act like a logia, and it was awakened to boot. And not related to the fruit, but Katakuri even had future sight, which let him see into the future. So in the beginning, it definitely didn't look like Luffy would win. But Luffy's Gear 4 Snake Man form, his growth during the battle, his refusal to stay down, along with the psychologically shaken state of Katakuri, allowed Luffy to be the last man standing. This battle that on paper Katakuri should have won going into it is a great testament to the importance of willpower, and maybe even a nod to the fact that Luffy would turn out to be a mythical zone because of that insane level of durability. Next, let's turn to a dude who was used by Oda as an offering to the One Piece fandom's god, Shanks. Of course, I speak of Captain Eustass Kid. I'll admit, I like Kid and I wanted to see more of him, but you just can't help a guy that keeps going after Shanks and his crew without ever learning his lesson. Luckily, at least, we did get to see the awakened power that helped him reach 3 billion berries and defeat Big Mom before Shanks ended his whole career and crew. So Kid awakened the Jiki Jiki no Mi, aka the Magnet fruit. The paramecia allowed him to create magnetic forces and thus to control metal. He could attract and repel metallic objects, which is very useful in a world where people fight with swords, guns, and cannonballs. There's just something so cool about watching a dude stop a cannonball in midair and then send it back at the enemy. We know he can use metallic objects to form normal or even gigantic metallic limbs, which he can use in battle. In one case, he grabbed Big Mom with his metallic arm and then repelled his arm in order to send even Big Mom flying despite her massive size and strength. Now the weakness is that if there's no metallic objects nearby, the power is kind of useless until you awaken it, that is. Both Kid and Law said their awakenings consumed a lot of stamina during the Big Mom fight, but they use it nonetheless as a last resort against Big Mom. Kid's allows him to assign magnetic qualities to something or someone. In other words, he can assign magnetic qualities to Big Mom and have her attract all the surrounding metal until it slams into her and buries her. Or, not using any metal, he can assign a specific polarity to Big Mom and then the opposite polarity to a wall or something else so she can't separate from it. One of Kid's coolest abilities though is definitely Damned Punk, aka Electromagnetic Cannon, that lets him use metal to create an enormous railgun which he can then fire at his opponent. It generates enough force to push Big Mom off of Onigashima. We see from Shanks' advanced future sight that Kid's Damned Punk was going to charge and fire multiple shots, destroying Shanks' allied ships. To credit Kid's power, Shanks does look very concerned and says he's about to do some serious damage. He looks grave and Beckman says it sounds like you've seen a hell of a future. But Shanks, being the overpowered Yonko he is, finishes Kid before the railgun can ever be fired off. In other words, the battle is over before it even started. And then Broggy and Dory destroy what's left of the ship, and the narrator tells us in a matter of seconds, Shanks just completely eradicated this crew. So yeah, Kid's career seems to have been cut short, awakened or not, and again we're reminded that hockey and not devil fruits rules the sea. But Kid must get some props at least for how much the power of his devil fruit attacked freaked out someone like Shanks. Next we got Trafalgar, Deepwater Law, and the Ope Ope no Mi, aka the Op Op fruit. Law paralleled Kid in so many ways. He also helped beat Big Mom with his awakened powers. He also got a 3 billion berry bounty, and then he also lost to a Yonko, namely Blackbeard, but it arguably wasn't as bad. There was at least a fight, and Law managed to be saved by Sulong Beppo even if his crew wasn't so lucky. So what is the awakening of this paramecia fruit that's been called the ultimate devil fruit because of its power to grant another person eternal youth in exchange for the user's life? The Marines at one point were willing to pay 5 billion berries for it, and when you think about how that's way more than even Shanks' bounty, I think you start to get a picture of how important it is. So Law's devil fruit allowed him to create a room, aka a spherical space, in which he can manipulate anything or anyone he wants. He can split apart body parts, make people switch places, and so on and so on. The limitation is that people, including Law, had to be inside the stationary space for him to use this crazy ability on them. But his awakening allows him to make up for this limitation. Once awakened, Law can create special rooms that wrap around objects or people, and he doesn't have to be inside these rooms for him to operate, aka use his abilities. For instance, with K-Room or Chrome, however you want to say it, he is able to coat his sword in his abilities. He can then use anesthesia. His sword can expand and penetrate his target without hurting them. But that's where moves like Shock Willy and Puncture Willy come in. Law releases electrical shock waves through his sword that fry the target from the inside. In this way, he can bypass the strong outward defenses of his opponents. With Puncture Willy, Law extends the sword way further than the target. Think from flying Onigashima all the way to deep in the earth. The released shockwaves make Big Mom cough up blood and also create a large deep crater in the ground that they will later send Big Mom into. Our room allows Law to toss his spherical space at a target. When attached to Big Mom, it follows her and lets Law use his abilities on her even from a distance. For instance, he makes the R room silent so that Big Mom can't give orders to her homies as she falls deeper and deeper into the earth. As with Kid, Law's 3 billion berry bounty and awakened devil fruit was not enough for him to take down a Yonko. However, I do think his awakened abilities are very interesting potential wise, and as a result, I'm glad he was saved. Oda clearly plans to expand on his powers and abilities and the rest of his story. And now that he's not with his crew, I think him teaming up with the Straw Hats, even temporarily again, would be the obvious move. And now we move to the non-canon awakened devil fruits, the ones that were not in the manga and so did not take place in the canon story, but sometimes these are especially interesting. In the first case, we got Guild Tesoro from One Piece film Gold. He ate the Goru Goru no Mi, aka the Gold Gold fruit. It's a non-canon paramecia that allows the user to manipulate gold. We're talking changing gold they touch from solid to liquid and back easily. One of the ways Guild made this ability even more overpowered was by surrounding himself with his gold and even sprinkling the people who entered his casino with gold flakes. As a result, if they tried anything, he could use the gold flakes to turn them into gold encased statues. Even someone like Zoro was a prisoner for most of the movie because of this ability. The awakening is not quite what you'd expect. It's not like he can turn non-gold surroundings into gold, rather the awakening increases the user's influence over their gold, aka the gold they touched, allowing them to sense the gold under their powers like a complex sensory network. In other words, if someone tries to break through one of his gold walls, leading to a treasure for example, he will be able to detect when and where it's happening. And although it's cool that you can create a giant gold mecha around yourself if you got enough gold, there are obvious weaknesses. For instance, you can't create gold or turn stuff into gold. It's not the Midas touch power, unfortunately. You need to have gold around, you need to have touched it, and if the gold touches seawater, then the effect is nullified. Next we have Douglas Bullet from One Piece Stampede. He was called the Demon Heir and served under Roger, the King of the Pirates. His strength back in the day was compared in the film to that of Prime Silver's Rayleigh, Roger's right-hand man. And since the dude is 45 and kept up his training for becoming the strongest, you can only imagine how strong he is by this point in the movie. He even takes on the many supernova present at the same time at one point without his devil fruit powers and wrecks them for the most part. making them look very bad by comparison. He ate the Gasha Gasha no Mi, aka the Clank Clank fruit, and became an assimilation human. This non-canon paramecia allows the user to assimilate or combine different things together. The awakening allows the user to combine things to an insane extent. Without relying on touch, the user can draw on the surrounding environment like houses or even opponents' ships, and he can use them to create what I must again call a giant mecha. Looks like the One Piece movies love giant mechas. In this case, the mecha is just made from the breaking down and then assimilation of many different materials rather than just from gold. This enormous assimilated mecha can split an island with a punch. That's how powerful it is. Douglas Bullet also has impressive haki, so it's not just the devil fruit that he has going for him. It took both Garp, Sengoku, and more to stop him in the past, but in this case, Gear 4 Luffy manages to win with some help from some big names like Sabo, Boa, and so on. Is it a believable victory? Probably not after how much they hyped up Bullet in this movie, but does it really matter in a non-canon story when the music is so hype? Maybe that's a more important question to ask ourselves while watching these movies. The last non-canon awakened fruit is the Ute Ute no Mi. This non-canon paramecia fruit allows its user to turn anything into a gun, turning them into a firing human. It was eaten by Bad One Gracie in the One Piece premiere show 2017, a live show that was performed at Universal Studios Japan's Waterworld stage from June 30th to October 1st. Since it's like non-canon at this point, they went pretty crazy with this fruit. The awakened user can turn surrounding areas or surfaces into firearms, like guns or cannons, including an entire island or even the sea. In the end, Luffy wins with Gomu Gomu Red Hawk because why not, but man did they get creative with this one. Now to clarify, those are all the confirmed awakened devil fruits, but that doesn't mean there aren't other awakened fruits in the series. It could be that they just haven't been confirmed yet. For instance, one that's probably awakened is Mino Chihuahua, a new jailer beast we saw in a cover story, and based on his appearance and what we know from the other jailer beasts, he probably is an awakened Chihuahua. But since it's only likely to be the case and hasn't been confirmed, I didn't want to count him in the title. Then you can really start to speculate about the others too, like if Kaido is already awakened and he actually started out as a Magikarp before he awakened into a Gyarados, aka Azure Dragon. Or you can speculate about Blackbeard awakening the Dark fruit, and that's why it's so different from other Logias, as Ace noticed way back when. But anyways, you get my point. There could be other awakenings, but speculating on those is more so the topic for another video. But if you can't get enough of Devil Fruit powers, you won't want to miss my all mythical zones and their powers explained video, link on screen right now. I even rank them in this one. Like and subscribe to help us reach our insane goal of 2 million subscribers on YouTube, and I'll see you in the next one.